All right, thank you all so much for joining us for today's Academic Job Search Preparing for an Academic Job Interview workshop. We all know that academic jobs are a little different to navigate than other jobs, and there's a lot that goes into this process. So, really grateful to have our panelists today sharing their expertise with you all. We have Dr. Jace Flatt from Social and Behavioral Health. We have Dr. Kim Barchard from Psychology. We have Dr. Bu Sang from Life Sciences, and we have Dr. Cass Shum from Hospitality. So they are going to get into, what the academic job interview process looks like, what our expectations look like, what kind of strategies that can you apply to help you throughout this process. I would like to start by allowing everybody to provide a little bit more of an introduction about who you are, and a little bit about your experiences in this area. So I'm going to start off by turning it over to Dr. Sang to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Bu Sang. I am an associate professor in life sciences and the graduate coordinator for the biology programs. So my experience, so when I was out on the job, I applied to like 50 positions. So I interviewed at about 10%. So I interviewed at five or six, if I remember correctly. It's been a little bit, but yeah. And I got actually one offer, which is the one I took. Very happy to be here. Since joining UNLV, I've sat on, oh gosh, somewhere in the range of a little bit less than 10 search committees, I want to say, something in that range. All within our department, though. So none of the more broad ones across campus.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I'll turn it to Dr. Flatt next.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jace Flatt, and I'm based in the School of Public Health. And let's see, I'm trying to think. I've had quite a range of experiences with interviews, both in terms of right after finishing my PhD, I was looking for a postdoc. So I interviewed for a couple of positions then. And then I have moved institutions a couple of times. So I've also had experience, right, with interviewing and looking on the job market, mostly uh, academic jobs, but also, right, sometimes when I was thinking about, oh, do I want to leave academia early in my career, I also had some interviews around that. So I'm happy to share those experiences. And I've also served on quite a few search committees, both in the School of Public Health, across disciplines, and then in some other departments. I've been one of the committee members, so I can share about that too.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Barchard, would you like to go next?
Yes. So when I was in the process of finishing my PhD in my last year, I applied for 47 jobs worldwide. My criteria that I needed the language of instruction to be English, and I would get to teach what I want and do research on what I want. And that resulted in 47 jobs, so I applied for them all. I got something like 9 or 10 interviews and 2 or 3 job offers. I can't remember the exact numbers now. It has been a while. Um, since coming to UNLV, I was an assistant professor, then I got tenure, so I was an associate professor, and then I got promoted, so I'm now a full professor. I've served on something like 10 search committees, most within our department. And I served on one search committee for IT staff people, which was interesting. Slightly different process, but mostly search committees within our department.
Thank you. And last but not least, Dr. Shum.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Cassant. I graduated my PhD in Management of Organization in Hong Kong in 2015. So the year before is my job application year. In 2014, I applied 81 jobs. I have a few Zoom or in-conference interview, and I have one fly-out interview, which is UNLV, and I get one job offer. So pretty happy with that. I start my assistant professorship after that. In 2022, I'm very lucky to get tenure and be associate professor. Last year, I start to be a PhD coordinator. So during my time at UNLV, I have been serving around 8 to 9 times in search committee, around 4 of which I am serving as a chair. and search committee chair, and then two of which are external to the department. So basically all university level dean search. So it has been more on the search committee side of the table than as an applicant side of the table.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so very much again for being here. Before I officially dive into our panel questions, I just want to note that students on the call, this is for you. So if you have questions for our panelists today, please feel welcome to, raise your hand, voice them, or type in the chat. And we're very happy to kind of pivot if we need to address your questions first and foremost. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off with our first official question, and whoever on the panel feels inclined to jump in, please do. What does the overall academic job interview process entail? What different kinds of interviews might candidates expect throughout this process?
So if you don't mind, because I actually have a graphics on this, so maybe I can start with that and other panelists can jump in and share more about it. Again, I'm sharing it more as a search committee angle of hospitality assistant professor. So it may be different across discipline. It may be different if you are looking for postdoc job or visiting professor. But generally speaking, your application process start with you finding the jobs and then this applicant applying for the job. And after you apply, you may wait anytime between 1 day to 3 months until your application is being looked at, depending on the job that you are for. And when I am searching as a search committee chair, I receive anything between 45 to 100 applications for one job. And at this stage, your acceptance rate will be around 1 to 2%, depending on how specific the job is and what kind of job is that. Usually the open rank jobs, you have a lower chance. More area specific, like more rank specific jobs, you have a higher chance. Then after that, it go for a preliminary screening by the HR managers or admin person or the search committee chair. That process can take something between 1 day to 1 week. And that is the time where they are looking at the application to see if they have all of the application materials fulfill the basic criteria. For example, if the job require a PhD and the person does not have a PhD, they got screened out at this stage. And I will say that you are surprised, like 5 to 10% people that apply are flat out screened out at this stage just because they don't know what the job is about. As a hospitality professors, I actually have see people apply with saying that they apply hospitality professor because they know about hospital, which are two different things. And then after that, the search committee will review the applications thoroughly, and that will take around 1 to 4 weeks. And usually that results in choosing 6 to 10 applications for the next round of the interview. At this stage, if you are one of those that go to the Zoom interview, the acceptance rates will be around 10 to 20%, which is much better than your first application. The Zoom interview is where they are asking basic questions, usually around 25-30 minutes about yourself. That stage will be 1 to 2 weeks, which results in 2 to 3 person flying out for the on-campus interview. Sometimes it gets 4 people for fly out, but once you go to that stage, your acceptance rate will be as high as 50%. The fly out stage will be 1 to 3 weeks in my experience. Usually talking about intensive experience for the search committee because they may have one candidate coming on Monday, another coming on Wednesday, another coming on Friday if they want to do it all in 1 week. And so that will be the final stage. And after that, the committee will meet and discuss to basically make recommendations. And then the ultimate goal of it is that there may be chance that the top candidate will be given an offer. The offer will be usually in a college given by the dean or associate dean, and the top candidate may accept the job. There may be chance that the first choice does not accept the job. So we make an offer to a second choice, and the second choice accept the job. And there will also be chance that by the end of the day, the administration and the search committee do not agree on the direction of the search, or they find the pool are not good enough, so they just fail the search after 3 months of intensive work. And then afterward, it have a job offer. But the time between final interview to a job offer can be ranging from a month to 6 months. So depending on how fast the administration goes. So that's about my understanding of the process. So it's not.
I'd like to say that in the Department of Psychology, the process is very similar. One difference is that our job interviews for research positions are typically 2 days, but for teaching positions, they're 1 day. And I would say that informal job offers can go out to candidates within a week of the interviews, but the official job offers only come from human resources, and they can take, I would say, maybe a month or two, I would say typically. So very similar process.
Yeah, I would say the same. It's about the same. Sorry, Jace.
Yeah, I agree. Same process. I think the big pieces, the one things I was thinking, and we'll probably get more into tips though, is like really, right, making sure you've heard, right, that you have to really be specific and make sure you're applying to jobs, and organizing your pieces, seeing like all the percentages of people that kind of get cut from the different steps. You have to be really strategic, and really know where you're applying and make sure you're a good fit for the position. And that's going to help increase your rate. So if you see it's open rank and you see another one that's maybe only wants to hire at the, you may want to put more of your energy into preparing that application. And something that's not clear in the process, and I think it varies across, is sort of how you tap into your network and like network a little bit in those different phases. So some institutions, it's fine to reach out to the search chair. In other institutions, they don't want to talk to candidates until they know that they're going to invite you for the first screening interview, like the Zoom interview. And I recommend, if you're going to professional conferences and you see some of the hiring committee, if you're aware of who that is, or at least the search chair, maybe going to their talk or somehow having an opportunity to network, that might increase your chances. I was just at a conference and saw a junior faculty member that applied for a job, and she used the sort of that strategy of networking, and she actually just in casual conversation met the search chair, right? And they may acknowledge that they know about your application, or sometimes they may not. And so it's sort of, you have to let them lead with their comfortability in terms of talking about the position. So just some thoughts on that process as you go through.
I'd like to add one other comment about who applicants will be meeting with. In our department, there is a search committee, which consists of 3 to 5 faculty members from our department. But the candidates, but that search committee does not make their recommendation on their own. We have a department meeting in which we all talk about the candidates. And so during an interview, during the in-person interview, applicants meet a lot of faculty, probably a lot of graduate students, and all of their opinions count and go into the final decision. It's not just the search committee you have to impress.
I would like to add to that, though, at the Zoom stage, it's typically just the search. And we've had some interesting answers to questions like, why UNLV? I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't think about far enough in advance when they apply, is like, why this institution? Like, how will you fit into this department? Which I think is really rather important for any institution. Like, how do you see collaborations, or, generally how you think, why did you choose to apply to this institution in particular?
Yeah, thank you all so much. Also really appreciate the visual aid, Dr. Sum. Thank you for providing that as well. So since we started to kind of begin this conversation, who would you all say, if it differs by your area, I'm not sure, but who is typically involved on the search committees for an academic position?
The chair usually has to be someone pretty senior, typically. So usually we don't have an assistant professor or a non-tenured faculty member chairing the committees. Sometimes I've found for most of them, it's a department chair that may be the search chair for the position. And then they try, it really depends on, the faculty background, but often on the committee, they will have faculty members that have either some expertise in the job area. So let's say, for instance, if the position's focused on aging or addictions, they're often going to have a faculty member that has some research or work in that space. They may invite faculty from a different school or department that has also a connection to that. And then on some search chairs or not search chairs, but search committees, it's unique depending on the organization. They might put staff or like administrative faculty on, like adding a person like that. And then they may, in some institutions, they've added a student. So it really depends. At UNLV, we tend to mostly just have faculty and maybe the department chair, but at other institutions, I found that the committee is a little more diverse.
I think I agree to most of that, except that in our college, we usually don't have department chairs serve on committee. They make their own individual independent judgment. In the process, the candidate will also need to meet our associate dean and deans in the process. And then they also make their individual judgment. I have some former students going to other institutions, and they even need to meet the president in the job search for a smaller teaching school. And so that may also happen as well. Our college also involve other department members in the fly out stage, not the initial screening or the Zoom stage, but then like other department member will also have a say about how good is that person, whether the person is a match. And one final experience is that there was a particular candidate that was pretty annoying to our beloved administrative assistant and was very rude to our administrative assistant, even though she is not a part of the process and she is handling mostly on the reimbursement and travel plan part of the things. The administrative assistant actually volunteered her opinions to the search committee, and she is very beloved and respected in our department. And so you can guess, like, we don't like the applicants as much when they talk down to our beloved admin assistant.
My experiences in the Department of Psychology have been similar to the ones described. Another thing that we do in our department is that job candidates meet with our graduate students. And so we have about 100 graduate students, but only between 5 and 15 of them will show up for these times where they meet with the candidates. The graduate students who show up are the ones who are most interested in the research expertise of the candidates. And the candidates get to talk to the graduate students. The graduate students are often interested in mentoring opportunities and collaboration and teaching. And the search committee hears back from those graduate students. The search committee was not present, but they hear back from the graduate students, and so their input is taken into account.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that during an interview, you're being interviewed by every single person you talk to. And so even if it's a postdoc, right? A postdoc interview, you're probably likely going to meet with multiple members of the group that you're joining. And, it would be, I think, unusual for the advisor not to ask for everybody's opinion. So, it's important to recognize that. And, I would agree with Cass that, in our department, when our admin faculty, or our admin staff say something about someone, it's taken under serious advisement, as well as our grads too, actually. We've had some situations where some interviewees said some interesting things to our grad students too.
Thank you all so much. So yeah, many different people involved in this process typically. Um, I'll just pause for a moment. Students, do we have any questions? Okay, then I'm going to do what I do and I'm going to skip ahead because we kind of started this conversation too. I'd like to ask you all your thoughts on how can students demonstrate their fit for the institution and the department in an interview?
Happy to start. One of the pieces I would really encourage you is to do a lot of reading in the call for applications. It doesn't always put the exact details that they're looking. At least I've noticed, right? They might have to fall in institutional kind of generic language that they put in the call. So I encourage you to kind of explore the faculty backgrounds, the areas of teaching or research that the faculty are doing. Look at strengths, look at potential gaps that you're not seeing that you might be able to fill. I even go in and find it almost like you're applying to be one of their students. Go and see if you can find the courses that they teach, the some of like the milestones, if it's a graduate program, have an understanding of what their graduate program looks like a little bit. Have an idea of sort of the number of students, anything that's basically you can access online. A lot of that will help you to go in and should one be able to ask questions that are going to be really meaningful to you to have answered. If you're looking for a program that has PhD students for a very long time, or you're looking for something that is not, you want to think about that. You want to know strengths and opportunities. A big piece that they're going to ask you often, and it might not be in the job application, is what classes would you teach for them? What research areas would you add to the department that would be, meeting a gap? So they're going to expect some of that. What faculty would you want to collaborate with? Even in the initial process, they might ask you, what faculty do you want to meet with when you come for your in-person interview? So you have to kind of have that. And then something I would really recommend is I almost find example interview questions and I prep my own. You won't know what they're going to ask you in the Zoom interview or the on-campus interview necessarily, but there's some pretty standard ones. What's your fit, or why do you want to come here? Oh, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? Those are going to be some pretty standard ones. And so you want to map those on to what you can find out about that department or that school, because that's going to be the way you demonstrate your fit. So those are some of my key recommendations.
I just wanted to add to that. I think it starts earlier than the interview stage. So I think that how you fit into the department really needs to be in the cover letter. So you should specify, because it's, you get 100 and some odd applications to go through. And so you want to be able, as on the search side, a lot of people target the letters that are really well written. So you don't want to write a generic cover letter. You want to say, okay, these are the strengths I identify in this department, and this is how I fit into that. And so, taking the time to do that shows your interest in this particular job versus, them just massively emailing a lot of people. It is a lot of applying to a lot of positions. It is a lot of work, I would say, to do this, but it is helpful later on if you get the interview that you kind of have a baseline of knowledge. And I also agree, like the more you can find out about a university, so when you come in, you're aware of certain things and you could expand upon those. Another element of that, if you're going to a research location, is if they have the equipment that you would need to do the research that you do. That's often a common interview question because if you need something that's super duper expensive and it doesn't seem like there'll be enough funding for that, it'd be a problem if you joined because you wouldn't be able to do the work that you do.
I think I agree with both of you in terms of that research as much as possible about the school, the people, the class, and everything, and try to put it in your cover letter. Try to basically know what is the job. Because remember, this will also be a job that you probably, if you get the job, spend the next couple of years in. So you want to know that as if that's your future home. But I will also add that in additional to the university, you may also want to research about the city. What's their favorite things about in the city? To show that you are actually willing to move over to that city. This is particularly true for smaller town that may not be as well known. Or even for Vegas, right? We have people that come to Vegas and thinks that Vegas is just about the strip. And then they ask me like, hey, Vegas is not child friendly. How can I raise my family here? And I have to answer them like, not at Henderson. You have one of the best school district in Henderson. So it's actually child friendly. So I actually know in that conversation, the person did not research much about the city. And so which is also another thing that you also need to research on.
All right, thank you all. I'm going to continue on a thread that Dr. Flatt kind of started here about common interview questions. So would you all add any to the list that he began? Any additional common questions that you think students can expect?
Well, if you're applying for a job that involves research, you'll certainly get questions about your research, what you have already done, what you're doing right now, what you would plan to do if you came to this institution, and how you would do your research at this institution, particularly if you require special equipment, or if you require special populations or materials. And so some of the jobs in our department require special populations, and it is impressive when candidates have looked at how you get access to special populations in Las Vegas and can tell us that they can get access in Las Vegas and they're excited about coming to UNLV because they can get access to their populations. That shows both that they have been thinking about the research and their fit with the program. If the position is going to include teaching, which most academic positions do, even if they include research, they usually include some teaching as well. What courses that you have already taught, which ones that you would like to teach, which ones you could teach, is good if the candidate has looked into the classes being the courses that are available at our institution so they can use the correct names and course numbers, but also refer to courses that they're interested in that we do not yet teach. Typically, faculty also get asked about their philosophy of teaching. And for teaching intensive positions, we usually also have a teaching demonstration, which we let our candidates decide what they're going to be teaching on, but I've also heard of teaching demonstrations where the candidate is told what topic they will be teaching. So that's different. And we often have questions related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, either related to teaching or research or service. And so all those core questions I'd say are common.